when you just tap in and you're touching your center and you just move with what is good and what inspires you and what you want to do, nothing but good comes from that. Always. Like that's the only thing you can trust. Only.
Totally agree. And I think this is why I think children are such an inspiration. Look at them, they're so careless. They don't care if something looks good, if something is a straight line. They just play, they just do whatever they want. They don't even come and ask you, do you like this? Will this be good? Will people like it? They don't care. They just do whatever. They're so in the moment. That's why as adults, I really strive to unlearn a lot of the things that I learned over the years. I think there comes a point you don't want to learn anymore. It's more unlearning rather than learning something new onto all these old habits that you've acquired over the years that may not be so healthy. That are really influencing the work that you're doing.
Help Me See is a podcast dedicated to the art of seeing. It's a space for the restless visionary with an insatiable desire to create the life and work you're meant for. My name is Bianca Mora, and I'm a photographic artist, a mother, and a coach who's transformed my fear of loss into power, art, and philosophy. One of the scariest quotes I never want to say is, "I wish I knew at the time." But I truly believe that we have the innate ability to bring our wise 2020 hindsight to our now. You can deeply experience your nostalgia now while it's actually happening with no regrets. All you have to do is see. In this show, we laugh, we cry, we get inspired, we overshare. We have life-changing conversations around making meaning, self-discovery, and shedding all of the BS layers in order to reconnect to our own sacred vision. Seeing yourself is an essential key to living powerfully. You are the vessel, the lens that filters absolutely everything in your life. What are you filtering for? Whether it be conversations with fellow artists and visionaries or my solo audio journal style introspective ramblings, each episode is meant to feel like an exhale, an unraveling of truth, a moment for you to be able to put your finger on something that you haven't been able to for far too long. Come exactly as you are. It's perfect. Honor your instincts. Let's uncover some of the most important things in our lives, which all too often can slip out from our view. Let's commit to seeing and consciously creating what only you can in your one and only life. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Help Me See. Today, I have a special treat for you. I reached out to someone named Tuğba. I found her on Substack, and when I got the welcome email, I subscribed to her Substack, and it said, "Hi, I'm Tuğba, a Turkish-Greek artist living in Berlin. As Slow as Possible is a newsletter exploring the in-between spaces of our lives that we see but often do not notice." I knew I had to reach out. I was like, well, I'm going to slide into these DMs because I have to talk to her more. Her writing is beautiful. I felt instantly so blessed by what she shared just in her Substack. Like, she shared, there was this one that I read where she was taking a quick video of the bells and the sound of the church bells from where she was laying in bed. And it just that level of nuance, that specificity in her sensitivity to the world and what's so precious around her. And we have a really important conversation. Lately, I've really been circulating around this topic of living, working artist, mainly because I'm pulling all the roots out and completely exploring a new way of doing it. And I've really enjoyed this conversation with Tuğba. She has so much honesty and so much openness, and I really think you're going to enjoy our talk today. If you want to learn more about Tuğba, go into the notes of the podcast and you can find out more there. I hope you really enjoy this episode, and I will catch you soon. I think it's so important because I feel that we have been, this is a tender point for me. In many ways, I feel like we are shown like the more dramatic version of like going after your dreams and doing your
Yeah.
art and taking yourself seriously. And of
Mm,
course, that requires, quote unquote, that requires you to, do the quote unquote brave thing and leave your full time. I'm like, that's such horseshit. Like, it really depends on your nervous system and like being honest with yourself about like what feels good in your life and what is necessary. And because different people have different thresholds for risk and safety
yeah,
and this and that. And it has
totally.
nothing to do with, whether I feel like when I first started my business, that I started my business like as in creating my work for profit or whatever, which it never has. But 3 years deep and I don't care. Anyway, so that's an exaggeration, but whatever. I feel like when I first started, I got like a little woo-woo about it, like superstitious in a way of like, oh, if I don't invest in this because I know this is how I want it to look, this software, this platform, this whatever, that's me doubting myself. That's me
Mm,
not taking myself seriously. And I'm not going to
mm,
like the way it look and that won't be good enough. And it was like actually really hilarious because it just wasn't smart, like from a tactical perspective. And in some ways, it probably added to the pressure and declined my ability to like create for a while because I felt so
mm,
constricted by
mm.
my finances that I had, imposed on myself for literally no reason.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's a good point what you said about the risk levels.
Mm,
Because, like, I mean, I've been doing on and off therapy for many years. It's something I always discuss with my therapist because there was a time I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to get out of corporate. I don't want this anymore. I'm going to go full time
mhm.
freelancing, do my creative work. But now I feel like actually, finally this year, I feel a bit more balanced and I feel good about my business job, like supporting my life and like the good things about it because I actually realized my risk aversion, I can't compare it to any other person. We're
Mhm.
all individual people and we have like very individual expectations of life, how risk averse we are. But also, I'm now 40. I have built this certain life for myself where I go a lot of traveling, I go out to restaurants. So there is like the certain lifestyle that I have. I don't think if I give up that altogether, I would also be happy. So I
Mhm.
don't think that's so, you know, you need to take into account if I go full-time creative, I would have to cut down on certain things at least for a couple of years, maybe even longer to support my practice and fully invest in it. But am I ready now to give up after that many years to when I was like, you know, getting this good salary, doing all that traveling? Yeah, I can cut down a bit, which is why I cut down to 4 days now. I've been working for the past 5 years, 4 days a week.
Mhm.
I'm even thinking maybe I should go on 3 days. I don't know, but that's still something up for discussion. So it's like all about balance. I don't think I would also be happy if I would give up all those
Of course.
luxuries that I have in life. I call them luxuries, but like experiences that I'm having.
Yeah, delicious. Like then that feeds your inspiration. That feed like like going out to eat and having a yummy meal. Like that's literally like inspiration in your mouth. Like all of these things are so important, and I feel like can be looked at as frivolous. I always felt like if one more fucking person tells me to stop buying a coffee at a coffee shop, I'm gonna lose my mind because that is where the most work happens. Like that is where
Yeah,
it feels so good, and I love those experiences so much. And also when you were saying that 1000%, you can't even compare your risk tolerance to someone else's because we're so individual. It's also like we can't define ourselves by what our risk tolerance is in one season versus another season. I feel like I'm still trying, even my creator self, this resentment I would feel about like not being able to get into that threshold of how I would or what I felt like before kids and then after kids. It's like, oh my
yeah,
gosh. And this rebellion I'd feel about like, don't, of course I love my kids. I would die for my kids. Of course. Why do I even have to say that? And also, like, that doesn't mean that my work is less important to me. It's just different. And I need to find that balance, but also need to recognize that I don't have the same life like parameters right now. So
Yeah, exactly.
we're already like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's such important conversations. And I'm just so grateful to have found you just for, hello, welcome to Help Me See. You guys, if you've been here before, you know how this goes. So I had found Tuba, right? Tuba
Tuba, yes.
on Substack. I don't remember how. I don't know how. I'm rarely on Substack. I'm starting to become on it a little bit more. I have a
Okay.
friend that absolutely loves it, and I really don't even know how I came across her, but as soon as I did, I was like, oh my God. I just felt so touched and I had to reach out to her. And so grateful and humbled that you agreed to talk and come on the podcast. I can't wait to have this conversation. Um, Tuba was like, well, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, literally anything you want, because everything she writes on her Substack just resonates so deeply. And we actually, before hitting record, have found that we're in a similar experience and season of like this push and pull of like
Mm.
making a living, living life, blah, 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 and artistry. So that's all I'll say too, but I'll let you introduce yourself, because, you know, it's so multifaceted. You create work, you're a writer, you're, you know, working in corporate as well, like whatever you want to share, please do so. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Hey. So yeah, basically I'm living in Berlin. And in case you're wondering, Tuba, where the name comes from, it's a Turkish name. Well, it comes from Arabic. But my dad is Turkish and my mom is Greek. And I always say 100% Mediterranean. And some people go like, what? Turkish and Greek? I always say, oh, I'm the child of peace. You know, like a lot of conflict always between neighbors. I was born and raised in Germany. And then with 21, I went to England. It was meant to be like a 8 months Erasmus exchange because the study that I wanted to do in Germany was in English, and my English was terrible. So I went to England, but then I ended up staying 12 years. I met someone there, and then we were dating, and then I did university in England, in Exeter, in the southwest of England. And then I lived another 6 years in London. And now, yeah, I mean, I wasn't planning to move back to Germany. I always had a bit of a complicated relationship with this country, being like my parents came as guest workers. So being an immigrant daughter, I never felt like, accepted here, even though I have a German passport and I was born and raised here. So like when I left to England, I actually realized how many identity issues I had. I had a German passport, but all I wanted to is to look German, so people wouldn't ask me, but where are you from and why don't you have a German name, and all these questions. And I think when I left Germany, I was no longer the immigrant daughter or like the guest worker daughter. In England, I was a foreigner, like many other people who are living in London or like the UK. So that like really shifted. And then suddenly people were like, wow, you're half Greek, half Turkish. And then I started to feel really proud of my roots and, like my background and having all these cultures in me and being connected to so many cultures. So like always a bit of a difficult relationship. And that's why I was like, oh, do I move back to Germany or not? But then first I went traveling in Asia, and then I found a good job here. And Berlin is not really, I don't know if you've been, Bianca, but like it's very different than the rest of Germany. I mean, it's probably a bit like New York, it's not very representative of like, or like London or Paris. It's not really representing. I feel like these cities are like so many cultures are coming together. It's not really representative of like maybe the rest of the country. Like when you go to Munich, it's still very German and very white. But I think after living in London, I wanted to live somewhere that is as international. So yeah, I've been living here now 7 years, I think. And yeah, I work for Salesforce 4 days a week. I've been working for them now. I had my 60th anniversary. And I've always actually worked in tech. One of my first jobs in London after university was at Nokia, and then I worked for Microsoft. So always in tech. I don't know how I landed in tech because my interests were always like, even as a teenager, I was doing, my nan was very artistic. She was doing a lot of embroidery, and I think she was a really big inspiration in my life when it comes to artistic work. So I was doing a lot of sewing, but I think it's also because being an immigrant daughter, if I would have told my parents I want to study art, it wouldn't have been an option. Like, my uncle was the first one who went to university, so I was the second one who went to university in our family. It was just like you had to study something like business or economy or economics or something, that was like in previous generation, like more tangible than like maybe studying art or something like that. So I think this is the reason why I ended up being in that industry. But I think everything, shapes us. So I don't think it's a bad thing. But until I graduated from university, I was actually writing on blogger.com. I don't know if you know, like this really like that tells a lot about my age as well. And then when I started my first job, I somehow quit that blog. It was quite successful. I was writing about beauty and fashion. That was back then in my interest. So I was always involved in writing or some kind of artistic work. And then for a long time, I didn't do anything. And now I'm back at it again. Yeah.
I was curious when you said that you ended up staying in England for so long. I was curious about, did you fall in love with England or was it life unfolding? But it sounds like it was kind of like it was more the fresh energy that maybe came from like, I don't know. Sometimes you don't feel that pressure or that constriction until you have the space, until you leave. And then you're like, oh my gosh, that was way more tangled than I thought. Or I remember when I moved to California, I was like, "Oh my gosh." Was born in Jersey, New Jersey, grew up in, New Jersey, New York, grew up in Florida. And then when I moved to California, I was like, I never realized I was always very unhappy with my environment. I
Mm.
never liked it, but I didn't realize that. Is that something that happened for you when you moved to England, or were you aware of it before you moved?
I mean, I would say for the first 2 years, I was always planning to go back to Germany. This was the first time I lived like away from my parents, and I have a great relationship with my parents. So I cried a lot. I was 21, but like I was like, oh my God, I miss my family. I don't want to be close to my family. But then I fell in love with someone and we started dating, and then I made friends, and then I started enjoying it. And then eventually my dad actually said, hey, why don't you just study in the UK? I will, you can continue having a part-time job and I will support you financially a bit because it is quite expensive. In Germany, studying is free. So yeah, and then after 2 years, I think, and then I was like in this relationship, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stay here. And then I started liking it. And now thinking back, best decision of my life to go to the UK. I really like it, still feels very home. I have, whenever I'm there, I have still this certain connection. I think I sometimes feel like I have more of a connection with the UK than sometimes even with Germany. With Germany, it's still a bit complicated. It's not as straightforward, like emotionally, but with the UK, it's a bit different, especially London. And when I was living in London, I thought I would never leave, and I don't know what happened, and I left. And I mean, yeah. So it took some time, though.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I hear what you're saying about that because I feel like that. I feel like when we went to move, my partner and I went to move to San Francisco for the first time, it was the weirdest thing because I was someone who, same as you, um, uh, for for better and worse, in my crazy New York Italian family, like we are very close and
Yeah.
also bite each other's heads off, but like very close. So when I went to 3 hours away for college in Florida, so only 3 hours away from my parents, full body hives. Like my dad was telling me, he wasn't telling me you could do it. He was like, "Don't worry, you can pull out. We can come home." Like, I was like in the first week of orientation in oatmeal baths while everyone was getting to know each other. So like I definitely relate to that, but I do remember and then I moved to New York and I was like crying every day of my life. I was so overwhelmed with it and it was not a fit for me at the time. And then when I moved to California, I remember landing And I felt like I was coming home, and I'm like, this is so weird. I've never even been here. Like, I had never visited growing up. I just felt so home. And I do think a lot of that has to do with like this identity conversation, like the
Yeah.
self identity, this like cleansing of like, as much as we absolutely love and adore our families and like what the ties that come with nostalgia and home and what that flavor is, it's also like when we're given the space to choose and start without all of these like tangled webs around us. And like even like the innocent questions of like, oh, you don't look like you're from here, born and raised, but like you gotta have this conversation. It's just, that energy, that change. So I feel like that too, as I'm, back here when I'm creating work, it feels more difficult. I think that's why I like being in my basement. And it's so weird. I don't know. I need to go into a void. I need to feel like there's nothing around me and it's black and whatever I'm focusing on is this right in front of me. So I'm curious just how you relate to that, what you feel about that. And you said you didn't create work for a while. There was like a gap or whatever you said. And just your relationship to the creation of work and how, you flow from ceramics and sculpture to writing and this and that. And what was that journey like?
Yeah, I think like this is like before we started actually recording what has been top of mind. Like last year, it was really stressful trying to juggle everything. And I think like deep down, I felt a certain um, pressure to like when I started writing my Substack, it felt so good in that to be in that creative space. But I think I was also pushing myself really hard to make up for the time that I lost the last couple of years when I took a bit of a break. And I
But
can't
wait,
even
what was
tell.
that break? Was it purposeful break or did it just happen? I'm so
It just
curious.
happened. Yeah, it just happened. That's the thing. It just happened.
Okay.
I call it break now because I don't know how else to call it. I just got caught up like working in a corporate, and of course like I was doing other things, and then I went through this breakup with my ex after 9 years, moved to another country, and then still continuing, and then like it was like still back of my mind that I was once into all this creative work, but then I don't know what happened, like, why I stopped doing it. And I guess life just happened. And I think then when last year I try and go escape the winter in Germany because I can work remotely. So I was in Brazil last year. And then when I came back, like before I went to Brazil, I did a meditation retreat, and it was like, really weird retreat. So I've been doing these retreats for a couple of years, but like I kept having these visual flashbacks in the retreat. And I'm not usually a very visual person, but like very like thought oriented. I think that's why I also write. A lot of writers have a lot of thoughts. But then suddenly during the 7-day retreat, I kept having visuals. And then I came out of it and I started doing like simple sketches and everything. And after the retreat, I read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic book. I don't know if you read it. I don't know. Something happened, something opened up. And then when I came back from Brazil, I found a little atelier, like a studio space for myself within 1 month, and everything went from there. Like, and then in June, I did like a course at the art university, like a summer course for 1 week. I met other artists, and now we have Artist Collective. I started doing ceramics in August. Substack I started in August. But then I was like going like full on speed, plus, social life, plus my corporate job. And like in December, January, I felt pretty burnt out, like really, really burnt out. And I think now reflecting on it, it was also because I felt like I needed to do it now because there was a time limit and I lost so much time already. Like the other day when I thought about it, I cried even about it. When I realized, when I reflected, I think this was what was pushing me to my limit last year, because I felt like, oh, I need to make up for it, which is, of course, like I don't have to make up for anything. I can make art until I'm 100 if I live until 100. There is no time limit. And just because I stopped once doesn't mean like eventually I came back to it again. And I think, I can't also say, oh, I regret it, because life just happened and this is what was important or what was top of mind for me. And that's why I moved away from art, but I came back again. So, yeah.
And again, that space is so important. And that's probably like this well that you're pulling from even now that you'll see whenever something gets made. I think about when you say that, I think about my experience with when I was in corporate full time for years for ever since college and until I got laid off. And I would still do my work on the side, quote unquote, on the side. And but very less. Like because you underestimate how much of your you overestimate how much energy you'll have for it. Because when you're, with people all day, you're like, tonight I'm going to edit those photos or tonight I'm going to do this. It just doesn't
Mm,
happen. And then copy, paste, 6 years goes by. And I very much felt that same feeling of, I think when I started and decided I'm not going back to full-time work, which was never a thought in my brain. It was like
mm,
a connection that never got made. Like it wasn't even an option. And then I was like, wait, I'm deciding not to because now it feels like I don't know, it feels personal. I just got
mm,
very stubborn and pigheaded about it. In a good way, though, I'd say. But I also feel like felt so much weight of like, this I have to make the most of my time. And I've always felt like that since I was like 12, a time on earth, like existentially.
yeah, yeah,
Like I'm
yeah.
like, I need to make the most of my time. And how do I so now when it comes to what I create and like the courses or the programs or the conversations I'm having, it feels like everything I choose to do needs to fill every nook and cranny of my soul. Otherwise, I'm not
Mm,
doing it. But that's
mm,
also been very debilitating, I'd say.
mm,
Like before we hit record, I was saying how like this dive into like consciousness and mindfulness and art and living a life. And also, oftentimes, like unless you have a beautiful collective of like artists around you, you we artists tend to be the one in the family.
mm,
We usually tend to be the one that has this affinity towards creating like this, and feel like we're speaking in different language than the people we're closest to. So it also there's this intensity around it. I know you said your nana, did you say, was creative?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like I had like a grandpa that was a musician that traveled the world, but also he died when I was little. So it's like those ties that you could tell were like strong, but also you didn't have the time to like go, deep and really investigate them when you were of that mindset. But it's like you can't say, "Oh, I wish I would have had those conversations." You're like, I was a child, so you're thinking, "I wish I would have created them," but like, no, I was living life and doing the best I could and just existing. So this idea of making up for lost time, this idea of like feeling like, oh, drinking from a fire hose. There's so much I want to do. There's so much I want to create. And it's beautiful. And also too much of anything is no good. So how do you temper that? Because I think that my quote unquote empowered choice to stop full-time work and focus on my business turned into something that was like way too fire hosey for me
Mm,
because I wasn't able to temper that. I wasn't able to have a healthy relationship with it because it was always in my mind. So in that, it created a big fog. And I hear you seeking out these meditation retreats, and I'm like drawing these threads between like, oh my gosh, these experiences, while they're different, they're also very much linked and very much woven together. So, yeah, what made you seek out those meditation retreats? Like, did you have reflections about that gap in the retreat and, whatever you want to comment on?
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I think, like, just to your first question, I would say it's still work in progress. I'm definitely doing better the past couple of months on trying to juggle. I realize I can't, when you take on something new into your life, that means you have to cut in some other areas. You can't continue, you know, like your social life or something else. I don't know, when you're doing sports or like other things that you were doing in your life. So what I'm trying to do is like really, I don't know, maybe some friends I meet now once a month instead of like, you know, every week. I'm really trying to juggle my social life as well, because like sometimes now I say to friends, hey, listen, we can meet, but I have only time next week because I really want to get into the ceramic studio because I haven't done any work. So I think I now tell also people, hey, sorry, I would love to meet you, but we will have to do it in 2 weeks because I'm already fully packed. So I've gotten also better, instead of just accepting everything, feeling bad that I want to cancel on people. I'm trying to juggle that. But then also like the art, like on my Substack, I only try and publish like every 2 weeks a post. I could probably do every week, but it's too stressful. Like, you know, I also want to focus on my ceramic work. Like now I've given up my little atelier space, studio space, because I want to focus more on ceramic. So I'm like making little changes now to balance out everything. And it's not always working. I still have weeks where I'm like full on and I'm like, oh my God, I planned too much again. But I think this is where the meditation comes in, or like the mindfulness work that I've been doing over the years, all these retreats. It really sharpens my awareness, like to be aware that I'm okay, this was not a good week. I planned way too much. So next week I need to do better and like, you know, maybe have at least 2 or 3 evenings where I just rest and don't do anything. Because I am also like, I call myself a social introvert. I love being alone. So I need to have alone time also to make sense of the world and also to process my experiences so they can feed into my art. And I think this is where the mindfulness work of these retreats, I mean, I always say, like, you know, a holiday is great. Like, I love going on holidays, all these new experiences, but they're also not really a holiday for our minds because you're like still feeding a lot of new input and like you still need to process these things. And sometimes, you know, when you come back from a holiday and you're like, oh my God, I need a holiday from my holiday. A lot of people have this. So these retreats, I really try and prioritize like at least once a year and sometimes even twice a year. Like now I have one planned in August, which will be 7 days. So it's like at a Buddhist center and somewhere in Germany, and it's fully like, so it's a silent retreat. We have a schedule every day. You do mindful movement, like usually you do Tai Chi or Qigong, it depends, in the morning, like for 15 minutes. And then you have different meditations sessions, like seated meditation, walking meditation. But these retreats, they're like a reset for me. It's like a reset from everything, from life, from my creative work, because I also don't read. I do writing, but I'm very like also not fill every break with writing. Like if I have a break, I don't know, like if I have like 20 minutes after dinner, I make sure like to rest in those 20 minutes. If the lunch break is a bit longer, I say, okay, I'm going to do my journaling now. So I'm very like selective what I do, because you're meant to really focus anyway on your thoughts and your experiences, all your emotions, and not like trying to, okay, I need to read this book, not to try and fill your, you know, time. And very often in the breaks, I just like lay on my bed and stare like in the sky. Like I look at the clouds or whatever from my room. When do you ever do that? That you just chill on the sofa and just watch
I
the sky?
actually truly am so intrigued, and I cannot even fathom what you're talking about. Like, I can't even it's making me panic to think about just laying there staring at the clouds, which is obviously very telling. But yeah, so when you're saying in your breaks, do you mean so these I've never been to one, and now I definitely wanna go to one even though I'm horrified. So is it that the meditations are that long? Like, just, like, throughout the day
No.
or what?
Yeah, I mean, like usually the like I can give you a quick like example of a schedule. So you wake up like let's say at 6:30, and then the first movement, it's like mindful movement. So where we do like qigong or tai chi, it's like 20 minutes. Basically, it's a bit like stretching and just becoming aware of your body. And then you sit down and meditate for half an hour, 45 minutes, it's the max that you meditate. Then you have breakfast, and then you do mindful working. So basically we help in the house, like cutting vegetables for lunch, or you do some cleaning, because like in the end, they're teaching you also not to think of meditation or being mindful as something when you sit on the meditation chair or like meditation pillow. It's like about how can I take these learnings and incorporate it in my day to day? How can I incorporate it in when I'm with my children? How can I be mindful with my family? Or how can I be more mindful, aware when I'm doing my work? All these kind of things. So the schedule is like quite flexible. And then sometimes you have walking meditation, so you can do them outside. It's like in a beautiful, it's actually an active volcano in Germany. It's like a natural reserve where this Buddhist center, it's like, so there is a lot of nature. And then you go and do like very slow walking where you feel your feet. But then of course you have breaks, like the lunch break, for instance, is like 1.5 hours, but half an hour lunch, and then you have like a whole 1 hour. And imagine like you don't have your phone, you can't read, you don't talk to people. What do? You just look, I don't know, you can sit in the summer, like I'm gonna do it in August now, so it's gonna be nice. I can sit outside, you can look at the trees, how they're moving, or yeah, and like boredom kicks in and you think, fuck, I just want, like, I want to do something, because you're coming from like super busy city life to like suddenly everything is removed from your life and you're like, oh, what do I do now? I'm so bored. But I think that moment when you're bored and this resistance kicks in and you like, usually you would grab for your phone or you would do something else, you would talk to someone. This is like the point where magic actually happens, when you are bored, because then your brain really, or your mind goes really deeper. And usually I have the best ideas like in these moments when I'm like super bored and I'm like, what do I do with myself? And because like something opens up, I can't even explain it. I usually only experience these feelings like when I'm at a retreat, because we also live in a society where we're over consuming, we're bombarded with things. So I don't think boredom is really has become a luxury, especially for us like living in big cities. So but yeah, those are the moments, even they're tough, but they're critical for our creativity, I think.
I'm like squirming. I'm squirming in my seat, and with a knowing though, like it just sounds like truth. Like of course, this boredom is so precious, and exactly, it's a luxury in this. I just the other day I was looking at, because I've come to the point where I feel like I I put these, the focus locks on your phone where it's like,
Yeah.
and then I just do the thing to ignore it. I'm like, okay, like I'm a child. I'm like, I can't I deal with the, I can't have the privilege. So I'm like looking up, there's like these phones that are only, that only do like, phone calls,
These
text
light
messages,
phones.
light. Yes.
Yes, I was looking into it too.
Yesterday, I sent the link to my partner yesterday because he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get a flip phone. I feel like a fucking robot." I'm like, "I know." And so I was doing some research, and just yesterday I found the light phone, and it's like on pre-order or something, and I'm like, "I think I want to get that phone." Um anyway, but
I
I
actually have this app, which I would
yeah.
highly recommend to you, because like even though I'm talking all these things and
Yeah.
everything, but I'm also just human. Like, 1 month after the retreat, I'm already trying like going
Yeah.
back into my old habits. It's called Opal. It's
Opal.
based,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
I
I've
don't know
heard
if
of
you
it.
heard about it, but this is what I use. For instance, I realized I was spending also too much time like on Instagram.
Yeah.
So and like you can't unlock it. I think you need to email them to get a code or something like that.
Oh, I
So
haven't.
it's not like these other apps, like this focus apps where you just ignore it. You have to pay for it, but like I I've come to accept it's just very human being to crave this
Yes.
dopamine, to grab your phone. So
Yeah.
if there is an app that helps me or supports me and blocks this, I'm totally cool with that too. Like, I don't always question or like, why can I not just discipline myself? It's very difficult to be disciplined in this world that we're living in when we're so much stimulation.
I love that. Can we take the shame out of it? Like, I feel it's such a
I agree.
shameful thing. I feel ashamed of
Yeah.
myself. Like, I'm like, oh my God, but it's built for that.
Yeah.
like slot machine, like gambling. Like it is built to play on what they know of our dopamine
Yeah.
experience. So like, okay, like I love what you just said. Like I just feel like it's so underrated to be like, I don't think too much about like why can't I? It's like, of course I can't. Of course. Like
Yeah.
it's built for that. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna invest in whatever how much it is to, have this app, and it like kind of sounds silly. It's like, well, just don't do it. It's like, no, can't. Okay,
No,
so can
I
we
think,
laugh and be light about it and then just take the steps that we need like you're doing?
and I can tell you something. I've used this app for a couple of months. And then I think I unlocked it again because I'm like, you know what, I'm good. And I was good. Actually, it changed something. It
Mm-hmm.
changed because like not logging onto Instagram that often, so I was logging on once a week. It really changed my habits. So like just having the support at the beginning, you can change your habits, but at the beginning it requires a lot of willpower because like you say, these apps, our phones are addictive and like they really like I don't even know, like, we shouldn't be blaming everything on ourselves that we don't have self discipline and we're adults. And why do we act like children? Why don't we have willpower? There are like someone on Substack a couple of months ago, he called it like he shared an article that they're like slot machines, like you say, they're
Mm-hmm.
quite addictive. And this is how the technology is made. And I work in tech too. So I know, like, all these kind of things, like when I was working in Microsoft, I was working for phones. You want people to spend as much time as possible on the phone and that people use it and that they buy a new phone again. So I think you need to be also aware of it and not shame yourself, and if there is any help you should get it. There is nothing. I think it's even my friends who are really really good, who have quite a lot of willpower, complain about similar things. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just a general issue with
Mm-hmm.
everyone.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And then I think about as you're speaking, I'm like, yeah, and also part of the reason why I'm so pulled to it is because of these serendipitous things that happen when I'm on it. Like I would never be having this conversation with you
Yeah,
unless I took a trip or you took a trip and and even so we would like, what are the odds of so it opens up such other worlds and universes for, I mean, some of my best friends in my life I have found through something that happened when I don't even know how it happened and I was on my phone. So it's like there is such magical like positives for it, but with everything else, like just finding this healthy balance, whatever way that looks like for you, of course. So now my question is, you said for a while you were using Opal, and then when you eased up on whatever the plan was, whatever, and then you found that it actually changed your behavior. What was the relation to your art making creation during that time? I know that one of your substacks you highlighted, that oftentimes there's like when you're feeling whatever way about it, there's too much inflow, it's not the outflow
mm,
of your production. And I totally know that. I feel that in my bones. So what was happening for you in your creation when you were taking time away from the phone? What happened when you came back from that retreat? Like what did you produce? Like what did you create when when you were
yeah.
able to get back to your tools or whatever?
I mean, I think I realized like I have anxiety, like mild anxiety, like most days, but like when I started taking more breaks, especially from Instagram, I realized like how much more anxious it was making me, how much I was comparing myself to other artists, like our lives, our things. And when you stop that, this voice also becomes quieter, your mind becomes quieter. Like I don't know, writing a post, but I wasn't thinking, or like I was making a ceramic piece, but I wasn't thinking, oh, this thing that I saw yesterday, this artist, she's way better than me. So this voice became really quiet and my anxiety went into its normal state of like being mild. I think especially the comparison one, it's a huge one that impacts when you spend a lot of time on as an artist on social media. First of all, you're comparing yourself, and there was a time I felt also very overwhelmed with all that inspiration that was collecting. So I was only collecting inspiration, but I wasn't creating anything. And that, yeah, I think just removing that part has made a huge impact. So now when I go to the ceramic studio, I don't have like these 10 ceramic pieces that I saw yesterday on Instagram in my head. I don't have anything. Like I have sometimes maybe I see something, I take inspiration pictures, whatever. But like I go in there and go in with my own ideas and not too much of what other people are doing. And I think that has been the biggest impact. But then also more time. I mean, it's as easy as that. Like if I used to spend also so much time on Instagram, fill every minute with, but now I just get something done or like do other things, which also leaves more time for art making. But I would say still the comparison one is the biggest one. It really used to make me very insecure and I would doubt every idea I had. And like after these retreats, it feels always for me, especially when I'm even disconnected from WhatsApp, everything, it feels like I touch my core again, like no anxiety, just going back to who you are, who we are meant to be. It's a really, yeah, it's really difficult to put it into words, but
That is
yeah.
so beautiful. It helps you touch your core. We talked a little bit about the subconscious effect and how that happens, and, not to underestimate what's going on subconsciously. I think only recently have I been able to start to see comparison. For so long, I felt like
Mhm.
that's not a thing for me because it felt like, oh, I was so much locked into my cognitive. I know I don't know. It just felt like that wasn't a thing, and then I started to realize that energy shift was how it manifested for me. It wasn't even that I was thinking, "I'm not as good," or whatever. It would just feel like this shift of energy into, ugh, just icky. I
Mm,
feel so elated and see something and being like, "Oh, I believe in this so much, and I'm so that's beautiful," and when someone does something amazing, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh," I'm not even having that thought, "I'm not as good." It would just be like this icky feeling in
mhm,
me, and
mhm,
that is it. I relate it to, the first time I learned about codependence in a nuanced way, in
mhm,
because I was like, "Oh, codependence." I never resonated with the word, I never took any time with it, um but then when I heard someone talk about it in a sense that wasn't debilitating, but in a very realistic way in their life of like, yeah, I don't really feel okay unless my partner's okay or whatever. I'm like, oh, yeah, that I, yeah. So it takes a
yeah,
while to kind of understand the insidious ways that we're impacted by these things. I think for me, my anxiety and my overconsumption is actually more safety and like fear based in terms of like hypervigilance. I feel like if I can just be
mm,
aware of every bad thing that could possibly happen, I can stop it or I can be aware of it or I can call it out earlier. I could, which as we know with like
mm.
like the idea of like attracting like what what's on your mind, it's not helpful, but it's very addicting. It's like, oh gosh, but this crazy thing happened to this person, and if I just know everything I can about what happened to them, I perhaps can stop it from happening in my life. And
But I think like what you said, I think I can only name it now that I was comparing myself. But when I was like in these experiences, for me, it was also like some kind of weird feeling, but I couldn't
really,
exactly.
okay,
I think, yeah, definitely. It's
okay,
now that I've really, like, for the past 10 months, I really cut down my Instagram usage to like once a week, like for 10 minutes, or like even every 2 weeks. There was a time I didn't log on for a month because I was like, I'm not really interested. So, but now, because I know different, I can give it a name, I can name it, I can label it. But it's like the same as like, my dad smoked cigarettes for many years, and he said he had forgotten how it feels not to smoke cigarettes, how it feels to be healthy, how it feels like how nice it feels in his lungs. But if you're still having these experiences or like these habits, you don't even know any different. And only when you distance yourself, and I
mm,
think these retreats always help me to distance myself, then you start reflecting on these things again. It's like with everything, I think it's not just like with social media, when you, I don't know, have had a time of like where you're not eating very healthy and then you start eating healthy again, you're like, wow,
mhm.
like I was actually feeling quite tired because I wasn't really, that healthy with my meals or exercising with everything. Suddenly, when you distance yourself again from something, then you can name it or see the difference.
That I'm like writing that quote down because I know different, I can name it. that's I mean, that we were just talking about that with your move, like from Germany to England. It's
Yeah.
like because you have that space, then you can name it. Then you can like yeah, because in NLP, neuro linguistic programming, we it's funny, there's different processes, and one of them is like a values discovery
Mhm.
process. And, you know, oftentimes when we're introspective and we can, like, I've looked at that, I'm like, I don't need that. I know what my values are. But when there's something about being forced to like name and select and put them in order, that is very sobering and very illuminating. But there's a specific part in the process where you have to keep pushing and like not pushing, but like that's not the right word, but you know, say okay, and then is that it, is it complete, okay, and then you ask a couple more questions, and finally you uncover the thing that goes number one on the list, but it was so big, your lens is so big, it's like panoramic, that you can't see around it, so you don't even know to name that as your most important thing because it is so big you don't even you know? So and these are the things that are driving our lives, and that's why it's so important to do this subconscious work, because you know, having the awareness over those, that intimate awareness um gives you the possibility even to decide whether or not you still want to be on that train,
Mhm.
to like or shift. um because oftentimes those are not our own choices, those are just what we grew up and like in life and that society and all that jazz. um I would love to dig a little bit into your artwork and your writing, and whatever you want around that, like whether it's your experience in doing that, or what the work is about. I know oftentimes it's kind of hard to say what the work is about, and it's a tricky question. But whatever you want to say about your creations, and the relation between your writing and your sculpture and all of that, I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I think like for me anyway, writing has been my creative outlet from all my life, I think, always. As a child, I also used to read a lot. So I think because I have all these thoughts, writing was always like something.
Okay.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think writing has been, that's why like, I used to have this blog on blogger.com. Writing has always been my creative outlet, except like when I was way younger, when my grandma was alive, I did sewing, embroidery. I used to sew my own clothes, like
Mm.
pillowcases for my mom, all these kind of things. And but that's also due to like I'm like so I have tremor on my hands. I've had it since I'm a child. They're always a bit shaky. And for that reason, for many years, I thought I can't do any drawing. I can't do any painting. I can't do any kind of art that requires me to be precise with my hands. So I was telling myself all these stories. But then, like again,
It
last
makes me
year,
go like, no.
I know, but this has also limited my creative process to only writing. I still think I love writing. It is really my space. But now I also realize I love ceramics. I'm obsessed
Mhm.
with it. I love, touching and forming and shaping things and painting. I'm not really sure about it. I'm taking some classes now to learn to draw, like the basic elements of drawing, because I didn't go to art school, and I have this artist friend who's giving me some lessons. But that has also limited me and my creative journey, until I realized last year, I'm like, I can still do it even if it's not perfect. And then I think I remember one day I went on Google and I searched artists with tremor. And then I was so surprised how many artists there are out there, also painters who have tremor, like really famous artists. But they just made it part of their art because, who says the line that you're drawing needs to be straight? It can
Mhm.
be, it can have your, how do you call it? Like your own touch. If you have
Mhm.
tremor, maybe your own touch is that it's a bit wonky, the line, and it's not straight. So yeah, I think this, and then when I fully embraced it, now I'm like, you know what? I don't actually want to create perfect things.
Mhm.
Like, I want to make things that I like. And I actually like not so perfect things. I like more abstract things.
Mhm.
I don't even want to create like plates or cups or whatever. I create these crazy, like yesterday I was in the ceramic studio and some people were looking at me. Like I took a big chunk of clay and I was just like carving it out because I saw this beautiful landscape when I celebrated my birthday in Crete. It was rocks, and then in the middle there was a sea. I don't know, how do you call it? Like, when you have like big rocks on both sides, and then in the middle you have a carving
Yeah.
into the rocks. But it was such a beautiful, and I have still this visual. So I was trying to carve that into the clay. And if you look at it, you're like, what is this? Like, what is she doing? But I think I'm at that point, I'm like, I don't care. I enjoy doing it. This is what I want to do. I want to do what I'm drawn to. And I actually, maybe because all these years I tried to be this perfect daughter, the perfect immigrant, perfect this. I was putting so much pressure on myself to have good grades, to prove myself that I am worthy, even like, being an immigrant, to live a certain life and to live a different life. I think I've like finally decided I don't want to be this perfect. I don't want this perfect life because it doesn't exist anyway, and it's like too stressful. And now I think it's like my art is the opposite of what my life has been for many years, like, working for big corporates, studying at a top university, having good grades, like all this pressure I was putting on myself. Now I'm like doing the exact opposite with my art. It's like imperfect. I'm like carving and doing really weird and random things. And even with my Substack, like for the longest time, I was like, oh my God, I need to have a niche. Everyone is having a niche. They have branding. I need to stick to one topic. No, like I want to write about whatever interests me. And whoever reads my blog will be people who also have different interests, who also resonate with my writing, and not because I've chosen to write about mindfulness or I've chosen to write about business. Like, and the more I embrace it, the naturally, there is a path that is like shown to me. And I feel like now I don't have a niche on my blog, but I also realize everything I'm writing is, I called it like the in-between spaces of our lives that we see but not notice, like this awareness, certain kind of emotions that we feel, or like certain things that I reflect being an artist, like all these reflections that we have in our life. So maybe there is some kind of niche that I have now, but
You
it's
are
not.
the niche. You.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and this is the thing, we're all trying really hard to be unique and have a niche, but every human being is unique. You are unique with all your interests and, you know, everything that all your experiences that you bring into your art. I am unique with my experiences and my life and my background, my roots and everything. We don't even have to try because we are already unique, and we just, like, our art just needs to reflect who we are, or like not who we are, but like the things that that we are interested in, our experiences, our feelings, everything that touches us that we want to show in our art. I think that is already niche and unique.
I'm so emotional. I'm so emotional. I'm so emotional when you said, I mean, the jugular was caught when you said you Googled artist with tremor, whatever you said. I was like, oh my God, like this is why it's so important to, and then what's so crazy is that it's like your whole life, there's this thing. And then all of a sudden I got the visual of like blowing a bubble or a balloon, and you just blow it tighter and tighter and bigger. And all of a sudden it pops, and then it's nothing. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm fully embracing this. And it's like my whole life, so much air, so much energy going into
Yeah,
this thing. And it was like constrict tighter, tighter. And all of a sudden it pops. And then all of a sudden you're just like in. And not that it's never ever an issue again, or maybe it can be, but like, I don't know. There's just something so profoundly beautiful about that. And then as you were talking, everything that you just shared, all the notes from our conversation thus far has come up. It's like, you're like, and then I was on, holiday for my birthday, and I saw this, and then it came into this art. And if you were very strict with your finances, would you gone on a trip for your birthday? And like, it's just
yeah,
like all of this. The common thread to me is just like, if you just move with what feels good,
mm,
not what is quote unquote luxury, like not what is something that is labeled by someone else, or something that was put on you by whoever, whatever in life. But when you just tap in and you're touching your center, like you said, and you just move with what is good and what inspires you and what you want to do, nothing but good comes from that. Always. Like that's the only
I
thing you can trust.
yeah,
Only.
totally agree. And I think this is why I think children are such an inspiration. I mean, you have children as well. Look at them. They're so careless. They don't care if something looks good, if something is a straight line. They just play. They just do whatever they want. They don't, they don't even come and ask you, do you like this? Will this be good? Will people like it? They don't care. They just do whatever. They're so in the moment. And
Mhm.
I, and that's why, like, as adults, I really strive to unlearn a lot of the things that I learned over
Yes.
the years. I think
Mhm.
there comes a point you don't want to learn anymore. It's more unlearning rather than
Yes.
learning something new onto all these old habits that you've acquired over the years that may
Yeah.
not be so healthy,
Yeah.
that are really
Yeah.
influencing the work that you're doing. If we, could be like 10% of how children are, wow, that would be already so amazing.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy to watch. Like I feel like both of my kids are so opposite. They're like two opposite parts of me. One doesn't give a fuck. Like one is just like just so he's so scary. And then the other one is so sensitive and so tender and so worried about everyone. And yeah, and it's just so it's so interesting parenting that and like wanting to foster that and having that awareness and seeing it and seeing things and feeling that reaction that you wouldn't have recognized if you weren't trying to parent yourself outside of your body type of
Mhm.
thing in that way. And I this unlearning is a very strong topic for me because I love school. I feel like if I could afford it, I'd be in school my whole life. Like I would get my
Mhm.
master's. I love it. And also I really feel like so much of what is true has only come after rejecting so much of what I've learned. Like
Mhm.
I love learning it and also it's so important to unlearn it and like put it away. Um I found that recently, uh, uh, for the first time, I'd say, I was able to really intuitively reject, like, looking and you said you get, like, tired of learning. It's like, no, but also yes. I wanna make a like, a card deck and, in some way of, like, whatever. Anyway, I wanna make a card deck. And there was a friend of mine was like, "Hey, there's someone I know is, hosting a master class on, like, how to make an oracle deck." And immediately I was like, "Oh, so cool because I wanna do that, and that's that, and I love lear" and I'm like, "No, I don't want because I don't wanna have any form of reference.
Mhm.
I'm so tired of already being able to pull so much, like, in my brain of, like, what I've seen. I want it to be from me in whatever way. Like, I haven't used Oracle decks a lot in my life. Like, it's a recent thing, and I really enjoy, the how they function in my life. I love the idea of, like, picking something and all of a sudden relating it to everything in your day. I love that.
Mhm.
And also, I'm very ignorant to so much of, like, the how it should be used and how it could be used and blah, 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 and I want to play on that, and, so knowing when it feels, like, nourishing and good to learn and having that grain of salt in the back of your head, knowing that, like, "Yes, I'm learning this, and also I can let it go, let it go, let it go," and when to, like, reject it and pull away.
I think there is one thing to learn, like the actual skills. Like I'm taking drawing classes, learning how to
Mhm,
really, it's very skill based. But another learning is like, what I was trying, what I was saying about Instagram, getting all this inspiration from artists. I think, we need to also differentiate what does learning mean, you know but I totally get you. I am at the point I want less inspiration as possible so my own ideas can come up
mm,
to the surface. And
mhm,
then if I realize, oh shit, I actually need to learn this specific skill to do it. I don't know, I may need to learn a program to do like offer a course or whatever, something technical. That's different. But like I think generally the idea generation, yeah, it's nice to do something and it's come up from your own ideas and you were not influenced by.
mhm,
I mean, of course everything we see and everything we do influences our work, but not to have always like these visuals and this
Mm-hmm.
too much input that we have these days, and just focus on what is your inner voice telling you, like,
Mm-hmm.
I want it this way. And I try and do that with my writing too. Like, of course I'm subscribed to many substacks and I read them and everything, but when I write about a new topic, I try and not do much research. I first get all my thoughts into the paper. And
Mm-hmm.
if there is like a topic that I need to research, because like this church, I want to look up from which year it is, and then I go. But first, I use this program Olisi, which is like a distraction-free writing. So I get all my thoughts, and then if I
Mm-hmm.
need to look up something, I look up. But before,
Mm-hmm.
in the past, I used to do a lot of research, like research to point, like, and I don't think it's always that good, maybe for creativity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's like no, I feel like I'm allergic to things like unless I either care about it so much it makes me sick, or I can't even read a sentence about it.
Yeah.
So it's like no, no in between there, and it's also that there's a form of research that almost feels like a justification or a validation. And it's like, okay, when did my curiosity and interest stop, and when it came that I want to feel like I have the right to speak on this, or what, whatever comes to play in that area. Um, oh my gosh. Yeah, I find in terms of inspiration now, the most inspired I find myself, like tingly inspiration is
Mhm.
is is being able to witness people's, like, right now, like what we're talking about, like as you go into that space where you describe like what life was like and now what the creative act is like, and just people living life in this way. Like people like finding their own way of living life that feels good. Like that is the most inspiring to me. Like
Mhm.
the last one of my podcast episodes before, I've gone on such a streak of talking to other people when it's been only me for so long, and I was just so sick of myself. So I'm like talking to artists recently, and I just find I am so torn apart in the best way by watching people navigate life and prioritizing their creative impulses, because it's so nonsensical in this way, but also very obviously the only thing that really matters in life. Like the most important, not the only thing, but the most important thing that matters is honoring that thing you cannot explain until you make it. And then you're like,
Mhm.
this right here, this. What do you do with your sculptures?
I mean, now at the moment, I'm collecting them myself, but what, like with ceramics now, because it's also quite expensive hobby, to have. So sometimes I make things. Like yesterday, I was in the studio. I had made something 2 weeks ago. I looked at it again, and some parts I didn't like it, so I just destroyed it. If the part that I like, I gave it to be fired. But I actually have an exhibition again with my artist collective. So I'm working, like experimenting in autumn. Probably we're looking for a location in Berlin. Yeah, I think I will, like, the epoxy sculpture that I made was also for the exhibition last year. But I think I'm now at the point I'm like, yeah, what do I do with all this? Do I want to, maybe I have built a website now, so I probably put things on my website, and maybe I'm at that point I'm like, yeah, maybe there are people who are interested in buying my sculptures, and I need to start that next step of like showing my work. And if there is someone out there who resonates with my work and they want to buy it,
Mhm.
then be my guest, of course. But I try not to, because I work in corporate, so this is my problem sometimes, that I can easily get into that of like, oh, how do I sell this, how do I market this? And I don't want to do that. Like, I started writing my first book, and I was already thinking, or do I self-publish it? Or
Mm.
do I find
Mhm.
a publisher for it? And then a friend who has written a book, he's like, maybe you need to take a break and first focus on your writing. I'm like, yeah, this is what happens when you work also, like trying to juggle, because art doesn't work like that. Of course, everyone can sell their art, and it's great if you can sell it. But yeah, I want to shift away from putting pressure to myself on myself. I need to sell everything I'm making. I'm sharing it now more and more on my Substack, on my Instagram. I've shared some visuals and everything, but I don't want to be pushy. Oh, I need to sell all this.
Yeah. 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 When you said,
It's more
like,
about playing at the moment and experimenting and seeing with whatever I feel comfortable with.
yeah.
I will then probably put it on my website and
Yeah.
see, yeah, what
Yeah.
happens.
Does this feel good? Does this not feel good? Am I
Yeah.
making it? Yeah. Am I putting the cart before the horse? I know. Self-publish or reach out to publishers, or it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's just so instinctual. And I think it's because we when you have that vision, it's so natural. Once again,
Mhm.
as addictive as social media is, when you're working on something that you're passionate about, your vision automatically just like takes off, and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. And it's like, okay, when do you pull it back and bring back to center, back to presence, back to being in the work? um yeah, I find that I'm at that point with my work too. It's kind of like, well, how do I want it to live? That you wrote something on Substack about, I had no idea about Cabinet of Curiosities. I did
Right.
not know. I had no idea that that was a thing. And before museums, that is so cool. And there's something about that that brings me, it reminds me of, for me, my photographic practice. Like, I feel like that is what it is. It's like when I'm in life and I just like this, and then this, and then this, and they're not related, but if they're the same exact thing at the same time. They're so unrelated and so
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
the same thing. And yeah, and I'm finding myself like craving, I don't know, just like looking at all the pictures I've taken over my whole life and like going back, and I don't know. I have right now, my desk is a mess with old hard drives, and that my organization is horrifying, but I'm also like, I kind of think about it when you describe with clay. That's what I'm like, digging in the archives, and I'm like, what am I? It's not as sensually, satisfying at all. Like, I'm like clicking in files, and I'm like cursing myself, like, what the fuck? Like, recent. I can label things recent, and I'm like, this is from 2015.
yeah, but don't worry, I'm like, my organization is
Oh my
like really
God.
bad as well. But I think this is the advantage when you have a job that pays your bills, that you don't stress too much about what do I do with these sculptures? Do I sell them? It's more about the playing. And you're like, yeah, if there is something out there, I'm actually gonna put it. And I think it is healthy to want to take it to the next level and sell it. I think that's also not, if that's what you want to do, you should definitely do that. I don't think like this whole struggling artist, also, we shouldn't, not everyone should be struggling. But with me, I have the privilege of my other job paying my bills. So I don't have that financial pressure that I have to already think, what do I do with this? So I'm still like in this experimenting, playing phase. And that's taking up a lot of time. And I'm so grateful for it. Really grateful that I don't already have to think, oh, how do I market this? Which gallery do I contact? Where can I do this? Not to think about it in a way and just concentrate on playing and, yeah, finding my way, really. Not even finding my style, but finding my way with it.
Touching that center, just touching center, because you don't need to find your way, because you are the way.
Yeah.
Tuba, this conversation has been so life-giving for me. I've like welled up multiple times during it. Is there anything else that you want to say? Is there anything else that has come to mind that you want to talk about before we wrap?
Yeah, I think like generally, like as a conclusion, it's like to conclude this conversation, everything we discussed, like, I reflect now in my head. I think we need to realize there is not one way to do things. Like, we're all very individual, and we have very individual lives. Some of us have children, some have a mortgage, and some have less time, some have more time, some have more capacity, emotional capacity. Some of us deal with mental issues. So we need to stop thinking that there is one way to make art, that there is one way to support your life. I think we all need to find whatever works for us. If 4 days a week working in a corporate works for me and my art making, it works. If it doesn't work next year, then I will change it. And I think this has been my, like, reflection now turning 40. Nothing is final. I can always adjust while I'm going at it. And if I feel like, like end of last year, I felt quite burned out with everything I'm doing, I made some changes. So yeah, I think it's also about not putting pressure on yourself that everything has to be perfect and that you need to live a certain way. Like, that's why it was great what you said. You tried this, you were full time, now you have focused on your art, and now you want to do something different. This is real life. I mean, everything is evolving and changing.
And I think, exactly with everything is a chance to start over and try something new.
Mhm.
One of my mentors, she said, I think each breath is a chance to begin again or whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, when you have that much heart and soul and feeling and creation and whatever into something, everything feels so big and so final. And that's beautiful in and of itself, but also it's so good to remember. And you can change your mind completely and you can continue to evolve. And you don't need to base your identity and your belief system and your way of living and being and creating on the truth that felt like truth in that moment, because it was. And your truth changes like over time. So it's so important to be able to be like nimble and flexible with like, and the way to do that is again clicking into that center. And now I'm like, I definitely need to sign up for a meditation retreat, because the fact that you do that
Right.
yearly, it's so inspiring. And I feel like that is such a way to do that and to find that touch point in your heart. Thank you so much too. But where can we find you? Where can people find more from you? Sign up to your Substack. I'll put all the links in the show notes of this episode, but please share how people can get more from you.
I mean, I'm still, even though I'm not as active on Instagram, I'm Tug, like IMTUG on Instagram. So occasionally I share some of my artwork, but my whole energy really goes on my Substack at the moment. So I'm
Mm.
really trying to move it there because I feel like I can connect much better with people. And now I'm thinking, actually, how do I make it like both ways? I'm gonna open up a calendar like you did for your podcast, where
Mm.
some of my readers can schedule like 20 minutes in my calendar and we can have a one-on-one, not like recorded or anything, just
Hmm.
a casual meet and greet. My friend Nina, she was a founder and she was doing these founder coffee catch-ups, and then she like opened up her calendar and everyone was scheduling 20 minutes, and she posted on LinkedIn, and she was just meeting and having coffee with like different founders, people who were in her area. I think this is what I'm going to do now on my Substack. So there are a lot of things coming, but mainly on my Substack. So my Substack, my name, Tuğba Avci at substack.com, and my publication is called As Slow as Possible.
As slow as possible. That's definitely why I clicked on it. I know that. That's why I clicked on it. As slow as possible. I'm like, help me. Yes.
Yeah, we all want slower life. Things to be slow.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much. It was great. Great conversation, and definitely do the retreat. I can help you out on that as well. You
Oh,
could do a
yeah.
short one. Yeah.
I'm going to have to get that link.
This has been an Awkward Sage production.